Imagine standing at gate 14, ticket in hand, heart pounding, only to have your boarding pass torn in half right in front of everyone. 4 simple words flash on a screen. Dad, it happened again. What power lies in that silence? What does it take for a single gesture to trigger a global ethics crisis, grounding an entire airline within 10 minutes? Meet Noah Elridge, a 13-year-old who can't speak, but has learned to listen and to be heard. From Portbridge International to the boardrooms of the International Council on Aviation Ethics in Helsford, his quiet resilience sparks a chain reaction. 42 airports suspend a major carrier. Regulators demand reform. And the world is forced to rethink how we treat those who travel without words. How does one boy's dignity become the catalyst for industry-wide transformation? What hidden biases lie beneath the polished protocols of first class? And could your next flight be forever changed by a symbol flashing in the corner of a screen? If you're ready to uncover the story behind the torn ticket and discover the unspoken language of justice, hit like, share, and subscribe. Then let's begin. It started with 4 words, that's all. At Gate 14 of Portbridge International Airport, the buzz of boarding announcements echoed beneath the muted shuffle of passengers pulling roller bags and slurping lattes. At the head of the line, a boy in a navy gray hoodie stood perfectly still. His left hand trembled slightly, just enough to betray the calm mask he wore. The woman across from him, sharp uniform, bright lipstick, name tag glinting under fluorescent light, eyed him without warmth. Marla Dane, 18 years of service, hundreds of first-class boardings, dozens of decisions made without blinking. Today would be another. Name, she asked, without smiling. The boy didn't speak. Instead, he held out his ticket and a laminated ID. His fingers were steady now, practiced in this part. He had done it before. She took the documents, glanced at them briefly, and frowned. Her eyes moved slowly, too slowly, from the ID photo to the boy's face, then to the small silver pin on his hoodie Tech for Access International Youth Delegate. Then her gaze shifted to the pale blue band across his wrist, to the 2 hearing aids tucked just behind his ears. Something in her jaw tightened. Her tone sharpened. "You're flying alone?" she asked. The boy nodded. "You're nonverbal." Her voice dropped into that strange mixture of pity and suspicion, the kind that came from someone who believed silence was a flaw to be corrected. He tapped 3 times on a communication tablet tucked under his arm, then turned the screen toward her. "Flying to Tokyo. Speaking at Tech for Access conference. Ticket issued by Samuel Elridge. All documents verified." Marla didn't even read the full message. She scoffed. "Who booked this?" she asked again, eyes narrowing. He tapped quickly. "My father." She shook her head, eyes on the device. "I've seen this trick before," she muttered. Then, louder. "This pass looks altered. No guardian. No verbal confirmation. You cannot board." And then, with a flick of her wrist, "Tear." The sound was unmistakable. Paper. Thick and official. Split sharply down the middle. Half of it fluttered to the floor. The other half dangled from her fingertips like a verdict. A mother in line gasped. A man in business attire turned slightly, then looked away. The boy Noah Elridge didn't flinch. He didn't cry. He simply stared at the torn halves of his boarding pass as if they were pieces of himself. Not because of the inconvenience, but because of what it meant. Again, she had looked at him and decided he didn't belong here, that his silence was suspicious, that his presence in first class couldn't possibly be real. Noah stood frozen for a full 5 seconds. Then, slowly, his right hand moved. He opened his tablet, tapped once, twice, then paused. He knew this moment too well. He knew that words, real words, wouldn't change anything. Not here, not now, not with her. So he typed the only words that ever mattered. Dad. It happened again. Then he pressed send. 4,700 miles away, Helsford, Netherlands, inside a sterile, glass-walled room humming with soft LED glows. Samuel Elridge stood before a panel of ethics monitors. The council room of the International Council on Aviation Ethics ICAE was built like a cockpit. Every console was touch-activated, every breach logged, tracked, assessed. Samuel wasn't just on the council. He had helped design the override system itself. And when his phone buzzed in the middle of the meeting, he didn't flinch. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need context. He read the message once. Then his fingers moved. Deliberate. He left the conference room with the composure of a man who didn't need to raise his voice to change the direction of an entire industry. He entered a smaller biometric chamber at the heart of the ICAE operations node. The interface lit up instantly as it recognized his ID-S. Elridge Level 9, Override Access. No codes. No delays. Just access. He pulled up the real-time report log for Vireo Air. Flight 241 Gate 14, Portbridge International. The most recent alert violation code 4.3. Passenger communication equity breach status unacknowledged. He tapped once. Suspend EEC certification for Vireo Air. A soft tone confirmed the command. Across ICAE's secure network, 42 global airports received a silent alert. A red lock icon pulsed next to Vireo's name. Within the next 10 minutes, loyalty programs were paused. International compliance connections to Heathrow, Changi, Haneda, JFK, and Frankfurt were quietly disabled. Audit flags unfurled like dominoes through every terminal system tied to Vireo's global operations. But at Gate 14 back in Portbridge, none of that had reached the surface yet. Marla Dane smoothed her blazer and returned to the check-in podium. She didn't glance at the boy again. Noah was still standing nearby, holding the torn ticket. He hadn't moved. No one had offered him help. No one had stepped in. The passengers were now boarding around him, careful not to look too closely. He slowly sat on one of the hard vinyl benches near the window. The tablet rested in his lap. He didn't open it. Not yet. Outside, the sun was starting to rise behind the runway. The light caught the top edge of the window, casting a soft reflection on the glass. Noah stared into it. Not angry, not scared, not surprised, just tired. Because this wasn't the first time someone had seen him as a problem, and if things didn't change, it wouldn't be the last. But this time was different, because this time he had typed 4 words, and this time someone was listening. 15 minutes earlier, everything had been quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. Gate 14. At Portbridge International was already crowded. A child cried somewhere behind the food court. An announcement buzzed about a delayed flight to Montreal. A gate agent dropped a stack of pre-boarding tags and muttered something under her breath. But none of it pierced the quiet Noah Elridge carried with him. He stood near the edge of the priority boarding zone, his hands tucked under the strap of his tablet. One thumb gently pressed into the small raised bump on the corner of the device, a habit he developed over the years. It grounded him. The people around him were in motion, fast, loud, sprawling. Their shoes clicked against the tile. Their voices bounced off the walls. Their eyes, when they glanced at him, didn't linger long. He preferred that. Noah was dressed in layered Gray's hoodie, joggers, soft-shell jacket. Nothing sharp, nothing that drew attention, The only color came from the pin on his chest. Tech for Access, Global Youth Delegate. He wore it not for recognition, but for truth. It said more than he could say out loud. A small alert blinked on his echo band. Flight 241. Vireo Air. Boarding Group 1. Noah didn't move right away. Instead, he looked up and scanned the gate area. He liked knowing where the exits were, where the windows were, which seats were soft enough to sink into if he needed to. One more breath. In through the nose. Hold. Out through the mouth. Then he stepped forward. The boarding line was already forming. Group 1 was mostly business travelers. A tall woman in a navy suit clicked through emails on her phone. A man in loafers was arguing with someone on Bluetooth about hotel reservations. Noah stood behind them silently, clutching his tablet, and then he saw her. At the podium. Sharp angles. Controlled gestures. Marla Dane. She looked exactly like every person who had doubted him before. Not in appearance, in posture. The way she scanned people up, down, quick calculation, and decided what kind of traveler they were. Efficient, compliant, trouble. He saw her eyes land on him, just for a second. Something flickered there. Not concern, not cruelty, just certainty. He swallowed once and stepped forward. When it was his turn, he handed over his boarding pass and ID. She took them without looking at him, flipped the ID, and frowned. No parent she asked without looking up. Noah reached for his tablet and tapped quickly. Flying independently. Cleared under Access Delegate Protocol. First class. Seat 2A. She squinted at the screen. Where are your verbal clearances? He typed again. More firmly. All documentation included in barcode. Verified at check-in. Marla glanced over the top of the tablet, but didn't read the full message. Her eyes narrowed. Is this real? Noah didn't move. Marla turned slightly, flagged a second gate agent with a flick of her hand, but didn't say anything to him. Instead, she looked at Noah again. This time, she seemed less uncertain and more annoyed. You're nonverbal, she asked slowly, like it was contagious. Noah nodded once. She stared for another second, then looked back down at the boarding pass. Then she did something Noah didn't expect. She held it up in front of him and tore it, right down the center. No expression, no hesitation. Noah blinked. Once, twice. Marla's voice was clear, loud enough for the people around them to hear. We do not accept fake IDs for premium boarding. Step aside. The hallway behind the gate went silent for a moment. Not completely, but enough. The kind of silence that made heads turn. The kind that made someone in line instinctively pull their child closer. Noah's ears rang. Not from noise, but from the absence of it. That silence wasn't peace. It was shame. It was the kind of silence that settled into your chest and grew heavy. He didn't speak. He couldn't. His hands hovered over his tablet, but dropped again. What was the point? He knew the look on her face. He'd seen it before. Not anger, just certainty. That was what hurt more than anything. Not being called a liar. Being dismissed like truth didn't even apply to him. He bent down, slowly, and picked up the two halves of the boarding pass. He sat on the edge of a plastic chair, set the pieces on his lap, and stared. His breathing grew shallow, chest tight. He tried to count. 4 seconds in. Hold. 4 seconds out. Again. It wasn't working. People were still boarding. No one looked at him. Not really. One man hesitated, almost said something, but didn't. The agent Marla had flagged Mason looked uncomfortable. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it. Noah stared at the torn ticket. Then he did what he always did when things got too big to hold inside. He opened the tablet, tapped 4 times. Dad. It happened again. He hit send, then he sat back and waited. Because if there was one thing he'd learned in his 13 years, it was this: silence in the Elridge family never meant weakness. It meant something was already moving, and someone somewhere was about to listen. Marla Dane had always been good at her job. At least, that's what her performance report said. Efficient, decisive, order-focused. Passengers liked her because she didn't waste time. She ran gates like clockwork. The airline liked her even more. She kept things moving, minimized disputes, and never made a scene. What no one ever asked was how she made it look so clean. How many passengers were silenced to keep things smooth? How many small storms she'd shut down with a clipped tone and a fixed smile? Marla stood at the podium at gate 14, tapping her nails absently against the boarding scanner. The terminal noise blurred behind her like background music boarding calls, rustling bags, rolling wheels. She could still see the boy out of the corner of her eye, sitting, not crying, not complaining, just watching. It unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. Something about his stillness made her feel like he was the one watching her. She told herself she did the right thing. The ID looked fake, the pass too clean, his silence too calculated. She couldn't take risks, not with unaccompanied minors in expensive seats. And besides, she'd seen it before. Kids with tablets, pre-programmed phrases, acting like they couldn't speak, but then suddenly getting loud when their flight was denied. It wasn't personal. It was just standard. She was protecting the airline. That's what she told herself. But something tugged at her. Something about the way the boy had picked up the torn ticket like it meant something. Passengers continued boarding. Marla smiled tightly at a young couple with a baby and waved them through. Another man in a crisp suit scowled at her for not boarding early enough. She let it slide. Still, her eyes kept drifting back. The boy hadn't moved, and that was unusual. She hated unusual. She glanced over at Mason, the junior agent she'd flagged earlier. He was young, too empathetic for airport work. He looked like he wanted to say something since the ticket had been torn. Now he was hovering near the counter, pretending to check something on the tablet, but his eyes flicked to the boy and back again. Marla exhaled sharply. "You have a question," she asked without looking at him. Mason shifted. "Are we sure that pass was fake?" he asked carefully. "I thought I saw him on the early delegate list, the tech for access thing." She turned fully to face him. There was no verbal confirmation, no guardian, no certification tag in our system. "It didn't pass compliance," she said evenly. Mason hesitated, but he's clearly neurodivergent. "Maybe there was another protocol I followed the rules," she said, sharper now. "If there's a system error, it's not my problem. I'm not paid to guess intentions." Mason nodded quickly, backing down, but his shoulders didn't relax. And she noticed. Across the terminal, Noah sat quietly, his gaze low, his hands folded neatly over the torn boarding pass, now creased and worn at the edges from where he'd rubbed it. It wasn't just discomfort anymore. It was shame, heavy and familiar. He'd been here before, in different cities, under different faces. The uniform always changed. The judgment never did. What bothered him most wasn't the ticket, or the delay, or even being removed. It was the feeling that came afterward. When everyone looked away, when no one asked his name. He thought of his mother then. He didn't do that often. She had died when he was 9, a quiet woman, always patient. She used to hum when he was overstimulated, even if she was tired, even if people stared. She never rushed him, never apologized for him. He remembered her voice the last time she walked him to a gate alone, just before her illness worsened. Some people won't understand your silence, baby. That's not your fault. It's theirs. He had been holding on to that sentence for 4 years, sometimes, barely. Noah looked down at his tablet again. The screen dimmed. He hadn't typed anything since the 4-word message to his father. The message had been read. No reply. But he knew better than to expect instant texts. His father worked in timing, not words. Back at the ICAE headquarters in Helsford. Samuel Elridge wasn't thinking about replies either. He was thinking about consequences. He stood in the main override bay, the room filled with softly blinking monitors, like a symphony of calm dread. Technicians watched him closely. They weren't used to someone of his clearance level triggering a live override. It only happened 4 times in the history of the ICAE, and never before over a single ticket. But Samuel didn't see a torn boarding pass. He saw a pattern. His son had been stopped 7 times in the last 2 years. Different airports, different carriers, but always the same playbook. No one asked. No one verified. They just made a judgment and enforced it like law. This wasn't about just Noah anymore. It was about how many others didn't send a message, didn't have a father who could break protocol, didn't know they were allowed to be angry. Samuel tapped the side of his tablet. Reviewing Vireo Air's ethics compliance rate. On paper, it looked flawless. Internally. However, there were over 30 flagged complaints about gate denials for neurodivergent passengers, all quietly buried. He paused, then sent a direct command. Trigger ethics review. Panel notification. Global suspension review. The code sent ripples through the system. Back at Portbridge, the intercom buzzed. Attention all passengers, we are currently experiencing a minor technical delay on Vireo Air Flight 241. Please remain seated near your gate. We appreciate your patience. Marla frowned. That wasn't scheduled. She checked the gate system. The flight was locked out of departure status. The control panel grayed out. Her ID access had been revoked temporarily. Mason leaned in, confused. Did we do something Marla didn't answer? She just stared at the screen and felt, for the first time in a long time, completely uncertain. Across the room, Noah heard the announcement, but he didn't react. His fingers rested calmly on the echo band at his wrist. The world was louder than usual, but for once, it wasn't because he had been ignored. It was because somewhere, somehow, the system had started to listen. Samuel Elridge didn't speak when the override completed. He never did in these moments. There was nothing to say, only actions to take. The panel in front of him confirmed the protocol execution in soft blue font. Level 9. Override confirmed. Ethics lock engaged. Airline certification under immediate review. For a man who carried the weight of aviation compliance for 3 continents. Samuel looked oddly serene, but inside, there was a cold calculation ticking like an old watch he never took off. This wasn't the first time he'd watched a system fail his son, but it might be the last. He stepped out of the override room and into the glass corridor of ICAE's Central Operations Wing. The building curved like a quiet arc over the canals of Helsford, modern and clean, designed for sound absorption and ethical reflection. The irony wasn't lost on him. His assistant, Theo, jogged to catch up. Sir. Are you aware this puts Vero at full compliance halt in 7 airports? Samuel didn't stop walking. I'm aware. Theo hesitated, then matched his pace. There will be backlash. Press. Legal blowback. Samuel nodded once. They'll survive the press. And the incident, Theo asked. Do we make it public? Samuel turned a corner, eyes set ahead. No. He paused at a security panel, pressing his palm to the glass. It beeped once, then clicked open into a strategy room. We don't make it public, he repeated. Not yet. We don't need the media to fix this. We need the system to feel it from the inside first. Theo stared at him, and the boy Samuel finally stopped. His expression didn't shift, but the air around him changed. He's not just the boy, he said. He's Noah, my son. He moved to the table and slid a digital slate forward. The screen lit up, showing a live feed from Portbridge International. The camera above Gate 14 showed passengers growing restless, staff whispering at consoles, and a quiet figure in gray seated near the window. Still, composed, waiting. Samuel studied his son. He didn't look for signs of distress. He knew how Noah processed pain, not through collapse, through stillness, like a tree in high wind, bending inward. What are you thinking? Samuel asked softly. Not to Theo, but to the boy on the screen. And then, as if on cue, his device buzzed. A message from Noah. Not just for me. Attached was a sketch. Rough lines. No shading. But the idea was there. A new interface. 3 simple icons. A hand, an ear, a heart. Each one designed as a silent signal for nonverbal passengers. Needs help. Needs space. Needs kindness. A system built on understanding without speech. Samuel blinked slowly. Then he smiled. It wasn't anger Noah was feeling. Not revenge. It was design. He sent a response without typing a word, a soft blue check mark. Noah would understand. Back at Portbridge, the air was changing. Passengers were whispering now. Something felt off. The Vireo flight, once perfectly scheduled, was now suspended mid-process. Their app notifications read System Delay, Ethics Review in Progress, though no one knew what that meant. Marla Dane felt the tension in her ribs before she saw it on screen. Her access panel was still locked. Her badge pinged red. She turned to Mason, her younger co-worker, who was pale and tight-lipped. I didn't do anything wrong, she said, louder than intended. Mason didn't respond. I followed protocol. Still, no answer. She moved closer, dropping her voice. This is ridiculous. We don't shut down flights over a misidentified ticket. I've handled worse than this. Mason looked up. It's not just about the ticket. She glared at him. What's that supposed to mean? He tapped the edge of his terminal, hesitating. I think you didn't see him. Really see him. Her face hardened. I saw a child traveling alone with insufficient verification. That's my job. To assess risk. To maintain order. Mason looked at her like he wanted to say more, but chose not to. Meanwhile, in the corner... Noah sat unmoving, his tablet open again. He was reviewing his own sketch, fine-tuning icons, adjusting contrast for colorblind accessibility. It wasn't a distraction. It was his answer, not a complaint, a design. He imagined a world where a child like him could board a plane without fear, where silence wasn't punished but protected, where attendants didn't need to guess intentions, they just listened in a new language. He imagined an airline where the first question wasn't, "Can you speak?" but "How can we understand you?" And for the first time that morning, he allowed himself a tiny smile. Because this moment, this ripple, it was the signal, the one he'd been waiting for. Inside ICAE headquarters, Samuel called a private line. It rang once. A woman's voice answered. Firm, calm, British. Dr. Helena Ross. It's Elridge. There was a pause. Ah, the override. I saw the flag. I'm requesting a Level 3 audit on Vireo's communication compliance. You're invoking direct review. Yes, Dr. Ross was quiet. And your reasoning. Samuel exhaled through his nose. Because we built this system for the passengers who can't shout. Another pause. I'll authorize the audit. She hung up. Within seconds, systems across Vireo's infrastructure lit up with warning notices. Not from press, not from protests, but from the code itself. They'd been seen, and this time, they couldn't bury it. At Gate 14, the whispers were growing louder. What's happening? Why are they stopping the flight? Did something happen with the kid? A woman with a service dog sat down near Noah. She offered him a small smile. He nodded politely. A boy across the terminal waved at him. Noah waved back. They didn't need words. Samuel stood in front of a blank glass wall, hands behind his back, watching the system work, watching the code take root. He didn't feel triumph. He felt alignment. His son had sent a signal, and the world, finally, was beginning to blink back. The morning light over Helsford was pale and precise. It streamed through the curved glass walls of the ICAE headquarters, flooding the command center in a quiet glow that made the space feel more cathedral than office. Inside, the mood was far from divine. The ethics grid was live. A dozen monitors displayed cascading logs, airline compliance stats, passenger incident reports, live ethics queries. Each pulsing notification added a new layer of tension, not from chaos, but from realization. Something fundamental had been triggered. At the heart of it all, Samuel Elridge stood motionless, arms crossed, eyes locked on the central screen, where a single word now pulsed in soft red, active suspension Vireo Air Global below it. A diagnostic note blinked. Ethics breach level 9. Communication protocol failure. Minor passenger for the untrained eye. It was just digital text. But for the ICAE team, it was a thunderclap. Level 9 was never reached lightly. And when it was, it meant one thing: someone had not just ignored a protocol, they had ignored a person. Samuel's phone buzzed. He didn't reach for it. Instead, he turned to the panel behind him. Bring up Vireo's last 6 months of neurodivergent passenger interactions, he said. Theo, now at the console, pulled the data with practice fingers. A bar graph appeared. Denials, delays, escalations, most of them buried in footnotes or minor code tags. But patterns didn't need volume. They needed consistency. And there it was, 37 incidents, across 9 countries, all with the same conclusion. Passenger not compliant. Passenger unable to respond. Passenger failed to meet verbal confirmation. Samuel didn't blink. That's enough, he said. He tapped the command log again and opened a secure ethics pathway. Then he uploaded something new. Noah's sketch. The hand, the ear, the heart, 3 icons, 3 simple symbols. He titled it Quiet Flight Pilot Concept, Draft 1. Then he paused. For the first time that day, he let himself feel. He thought of the first time Noah lost speech, not because he never had it, but because it simply stopped. After his mother's funeral. After all the adults tried to explain death with words Noah didn't need. Samuel had panicked back then. He thought his son was breaking. But he wasn't. He was rewiring. Noah didn't need sound to understand the world. The world needed to learn how to understand Noah. And this was the beginning. A quiet language for silent travelers. A new kind of standard. The door behind him opened. Dr. Helena Ross entered, flanked by 2 data compliance officers. "Samuel," she said, brisk and composed as always. "Helena," he replied. She walked straight to the console and scanned the suspension report. "You went full level 9. "Yes." She raised an eyebrow. "Over a ticket." "No," he replied. "Over a dismissal." She nodded once. "Tight." "Will it hold up?" Samuel looked directly at her. "I don't override systems. I confirm what they already saw." Helena leaned against the edge of the console and studied the image on screen. Noah's interface draft. "Who designed this?" Samuel didn't answer immediately. Then Noah. Her eyes narrowed. Not in judgment, but in curiosity. How old is he now, 13? And he came up with this after today's incident. No, he's been building it quietly for 2 years. She straightened up. "And you're proposing we fast-track a pilot trial." Samuel met her gaze. "I'm proposing we make it the new baseline." Helena didn't respond at first. She moved to the window and looked out over Helsford's silver rooftops. The canals below shimmered. The world outside didn't know anything had changed yet. But it would. "Do you think they'll accept it?" she asked softly. "No," Samuel said. "But they'll have to adapt." Back at Portbridge International. The delay announcement for Flight 241 had entered its 2nd hour. The crowd was restless. First-class passengers were now huddled at the corner counter, complaining into phones, gesturing to managers, but the gate remained sealed. Marla Dane sat behind the desk, silent, her eyes locked on her own terminal. Her badge status still read, "Under review." She had tried 3 times to regain access. Nothing worked, not even her override code. It was like the system had frozen her out entirely. Mason returned from a phone call, his expression unreadable. "What's the status?" she asked. He hesitated. "They said it's under ethics lockdown. Full ICAE hold." Marla blinked. "They don't use full holds unless I know," he said. The silence between them thickened. She looked out across the terminal. Noah was still there, sitting calmly, no outburst, no confrontation, just watching. "What does he want?" she muttered. Mason followed her gaze. "To fly," he said. Marla swallowed. It was just a misunderstanding. "No," Mason said quietly. "It was a decision." She opened her mouth to respond, but closed it again. The truth was heavier than she wanted to admit. Noah hadn't yelled, hadn't accused, hadn't recorded her. He had simply sent a message. And the world moved. In Helsford, Samuel sent one more command, a broadcast. "To all ICAE registered carriers, immediate review required for silent boarding protocols. Submission deadline 14 days. All delays will impact global certifications." It was written in standard compliance language, but the meaning underneath was clear. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a signal, one the industry could no longer ignore. Back at Gate 14, Noah looked down at his watch. The soft glow on the screen blinked back at him. It wasn't time to board. Not yet. But it was time. The delay announcement had reached its 3rd repetition. Some passengers were now sitting on the floor near their gate, their luggage propped under tired legs, sighing and scrolling endlessly on their phones. Others paced, irritated. A few were on calls with travel agents, trying to reroute themselves through other airlines. But one person had not moved since the first announcement. Noah Elridge sat quietly near the wide window overlooking the runway. The torn boarding pass lay flat on the seat next to him, unbothered. His tablet rested on his lap, but the screen was off. He wasn't sketching anymore. He was listening, watching, feeling the shift. It was subtle, but it was happening. The stillness in the air had changed. People were no longer just confused. They were unsettled. Something beyond a missed flight was brewing. And although no one said it out loud, they felt it. Mason Leary noticed it first. He stood behind the gate counter, glancing now and then at the glitching status display Flight 241, delayed, ethics audit in progress. That message wasn't just unusual, it was unheard of. The ICAE didn't publicly declare audits in real time, unless it wanted to send a message. Mason swallowed. His fingers hovered over the edge of the desk. He knew something bigger was happening, something above his pay grade. But more than that, he felt the weight of something else. Guilt. He had seen the boy earlier, had heard the tone in Marla's voice. He should have spoken up, should have stopped it when he had the chance. But the moment passed, and like everyone else, he had looked down. Now the system was doing what he hadn't. It was speaking. Marla stood beside him, her arms crossed tightly. She looked like she was trying to hold herself together with posture alone. Her access still hadn't returned. Her calls to supervisors had gone unanswered. She was still locked out of every terminal command. "This isn't a glitch," she said quietly. Mason didn't respond. She looked at him then. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "I've worked here 18 years. I've had hundreds of parents yell at me. Kids lie. People forge tickets. I've handled it all." "I know," Mason said. Finally. "But this," she continued, "this feels different." He nodded. "Because it is." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Marla asked, "Do you think it was really his ticket?" "Yes," Mason said. She took a step back, her throat tightening. "Do you think I was wrong?" He looked at her, not harshly, but without flinching. "I think you didn't ask enough questions." She didn't say anything after that. Outside, a light drizzle had begun to fall. Rain traced slow streaks down the tall glass windows, catching glimmers from the overhead lights. Noah watched them slide and disappear, over and over. He used to imagine they were messages, little signals being sent down from the sky. He imagined it now, just to keep himself from floating away. A few passengers were now beginning to notice him. A woman leaned toward her husband and whispered, "That's the kid, isn't it?" Her husband nodded slowly. "Why isn't he crying?" she asked. "Maybe he knows something. We don't," he replied. Noah heard none of this, but he could feel it, the shift in posture, the pull of attention. He didn't like it. He never had. He didn't want to be a symbol. He just wanted a seat on the plane. But the world didn't let people like him just exist. It made them prove it, again and again. He reached for his tablet and opened the quiet flight draft again. He didn't add anything new, just stared at the three icons. The hand, I need assistance. The ear, I process differently. The heart, I deserve respect. He tapped each one gently, not to test, just to remember. A small vibration buzzed on his wrist. A new message from his father. Quiet flight concept approved for formal ICAE evaluation. You started something. Noah exhaled. He hadn't even realized he was holding his breath. Across the world in Helsford, Samuel Elridge watched the ripple unfold in real time. Vireo Air's legal team had issued a soft denial, claiming boarding confusion and technical complications. They hadn't named Noah, hadn't accepted blame, but that didn't matter. ICAE had already suspended 3 upcoming flight permits. Their reputation wasn't just dented, it was exposed. The audit logs were spreading to every major partner airline. Each one now faced a single question. Do your systems accommodate passengers who cannot speak? For most, the answer was no. And that was the point. Samuel stood at the glass wall, arms crossed, watching the downpour begin. He wasn't angry, not anymore. He was focused. This wasn't about Noah alone. This was about every child who had ever been stopped, searched, or questioned for needing a different way to move through the world. And now the industry couldn't pretend it hadn't seen them. Back at Gate 14, a quiet chime rang through the terminal. Mason looked up. His screen flashed a message. Immediate reversal, Gate 14. Reinstate boarding authority for passenger Elridge. Noah. Proceed with escorted priority boarding. He turned to Marla, wide-eyed. You seeing this? Marla stared at her own screen, which now showed a green check mark next to Noah's name and an embedded ICAE seal that couldn't be forged. She said nothing. Mason stepped out from behind the counter, slowly approached Noah, and knelt beside him. Noah, he asked gently. Noah turned his head. Mason held up a fresh boarding pass. They reinstated your seat. You're back in 2A. Would you like me to walk you through the gate? Noah didn't answer with words. He tapped his tablet once and turned the screen toward him. Thank you. Marla watched from behind the desk, her hands clenched tightly. Not because she was angry at the boy, but because for the first time in her long, flawless career, she wasn't sure who she was anymore. Noah stood slowly, slipped his bag over his shoulder, and followed Mason toward the gate. This time, no one stopped him. Passengers parted like water around a stone. Not out of fear, not out of spectacle, out of respect, because somewhere deep inside, they knew. This wasn't about special treatment. It was about being seen, being understood, being allowed to exist fully and without condition. Noah paused at the threshold of the jet bridge. He turned once, just briefly, and met Marla's gaze. There was no anger in his eyes, only something deeper, something she didn't know how to name. Then he boarded, and the door closed behind him. Noah Elridge stepped through the jet bridge into the aircraft, the low thrum of the engines vibrating beneath his feet. The lighting inside was soft and dimmed for comfort, the kind of muted luxury Vireo Air prided itself on in its premium cabins. But Noah wasn't here for luxury. He was here because he earned his place, because he refused to be erased. The flight attendant at the door was different from earlier. A young man, early 30s, neatly groomed, kind eyes. He offered a calm smile the moment Noah entered. Hi there. You must be Mr. Elridge. Welcome aboard, he said. Noah nodded slightly. The man didn't flinch or falter. If you'd like, I can show you to your seat. 2A, right up front. Another nod. He stepped aside and gestured forward without pressure. No questions about age, no probing, no hesitation. Noah appreciated that. As he moved through the cabin, passengers turned to glance, then quickly looked away. He could feel the attention linger a beat too long, like smoke that clung to the air even after the match had been snuffed out. He passed rows of wide leather seats until he reached his own. Seat 2A, window seat, first class, clean, quiet, his name stitched digitally on the headrest. He slid into the seat and placed his backpack on the floor. His tablet rested gently in his lap, though his fingers didn't move across it this time. Not yet. Across the aisle in 2B sat a woman with a silk scarf around her neck and a magazine folded neatly in her lap. She was older, with silver hair pinned in a twist and reading glasses perched at the end of her nose. She gave him a polite nod, but said nothing. That, too, he appreciated. The flight attendant returned and knelt beside his seat. He didn't crouch or bend down like talking to a child. He simply lowered himself enough to meet Noah at eye level. "My name's Elliot," he said gently. "I'll be in the front galley. If you need anything, you can press the service button, or you can show me a note on your tablet. Whatever's easiest." Okay, Noah pulled up a pre-written card and turned it toward him. "Thank you. Elliot? Quiet preferred. Light meal. Okay. No verbal communication needed." Elliot read it, smiled again, and nodded. "Got it. I've got some noise-canceling headsets if you want them during takeoff." Noah tapped. "Yes." Here, Elliot handed him the headphones and returned to the galley, leaving Noah with his own breathing and the hum of the cabin. He adjusted the headrest, angled his seat slightly, and looked out the window. The rain had stopped. There were just faint streaks of moisture trailing the outside glass. Reflections of runway lights shimmered along the fuselage, casting golden lines into the dark blue dusk. The airport felt far away now, like something that had happened in a different timeline. And maybe it had. The boy who had been dismissed. The boy who had sat silent while a boarding pass was torn in two. He was still here, but now he was seated. He was seen. And more than that, he had changed something. Noah stared at his reflection in the window. His face was steady, but his stomach churned with something he hadn't processed yet. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even sadness. It was grief. The quiet grief of realizing how many times he had accepted less. How many times he had told himself, "It's okay. I'll just wait. I'll be quiet. I'll go around it." Today, something cracked, and in the breaking, something honest had finally spoken. He closed his eyes. In the back of the plane, boarding finished, the door sealed, the intercom buzzed to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Vireo Flight 241 from Portbridge to Kelston. Flight time today will be just over 3 hours. Please direct your attention to the safety demonstration." Noah opened his eyes again and looked around. Everyone else watched the flight attendants. He reached for his seatbelt, fastened it, then folded his hands over his stomach and exhaled. He remembered his mother again. She had always chosen the window seat for him, always packed headphones and extra chargers. When she passed, his father kept the ritual alive. He didn't speak of her often, but she was everywhere in their routines. Noah kept a small picture of her in his tablet case. Not for comfort, for grounding. She had loved the sky, had told him once that the air up here felt quieter, like it belonged to people who listened with more than ears. He understood that now more than ever. The plane lifted. Noah felt the shift in gravity, the hum of acceleration, the strange stillness as the wheels lifted from the ground. And just like that, the world below was gone. For a while, 30 minutes into the flight. Elliot returned with a meal tray. He placed it on Noah's fold-out table without saying a word. A warm sandwich, sliced fruit, and a paper napkin folded with careful precision. Noah turned his tablet toward him. "Thank you for being kind." Elliot gave a small nod. "Thank you for reminding us how to be." He walked away again, leaving Noah to his meal and his thoughts. As he ate, he opened the quiet flight draft once more. But this time, he didn't edit it. He just added one thing, a small footer under the heart icon. "You don't have to speak to matter." He sat back in his seat, full but not heavy. Outside, the clouds thinned, revealing a deep blue sky streaked with the last rays of fading sunlight. From 30,000 feet, the world looked soft, But Noah knew better. He knew softness had to be built, protected, designed. And maybe, just maybe, he was the one who had started building it. The first jolt came without warning. Noah's glass of water trembled slightly on the tray before a low crack of turbulence rolled beneath the plane like distant thunder. It wasn't violent, but it was enough to snap passengers from their idle thoughts. Seatbelts clicked, heads turned. The pilot's voice came on quickly. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We're hitting a patch of choppy air over the western ridge. Nothing unusual, but please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." The calm tone did its job for most. Passengers muttered, adjusted themselves, went back to their books or screens. But for Noah, the world shifted in a deeper way. He didn't fear flying. It wasn't the physical motion that unsettled him. It was what turbulence reminded him of, the instability, the unpredictability of how quickly things could break or be taken away, just like that torn ticket, just like his mother. His body stiffened, not visibly, but his hands, which had been calmly resting in his lap, now clenched around the tablet. His jaw set tighter, his breath shortened. The seatbelt tugged slightly across his waist, a soft anchor. He focused on it, used it to ground himself. Breathe in, breathe out. You are here. You are safe. No one can take this from you. A second jolt rocked the plane, stronger this time. Several overhead compartments creaked. A tray clattered to the floor behind him. Someone gasped. Noah closed his eyes, and just like that, he was 6 years old again. A hospital waiting room, white walls, harsh lights. A woman's voice cracking as she explained the words "inoperable tumor in 3 months." He had not spoken for 2 years after that. Silence became his gravity. Back then, no one asked him what he felt. They just filled the space with their own fears, their own pity, their own plans. No one stopped to sit beside him in that silence, except his father. And now, here he was on a flight that wasn't supposed to let him board, in a seat no one thought he deserved, surrounded by strangers who still didn't know his name. Another tremor passed, this time lighter, as if the plane itself was exhaling. The captain came back on. "We're through the worst of it, folks. Smooth skies ahead." There was a soft wave of relief, murmurs through the rows, people relaxing again. Noah didn't move, but he did feel something shift near him. A voice. "Are you all right?" The woman in 2B had leaned slightly toward him. She didn't touch him, didn't speak too loudly, but her voice had that worn texture, like someone who'd lived through real things. Noah didn't look at her right away. Then, slowly, he turned and met her eyes. "I noticed you flinched when the tray shook," she said gently. "Happens to me, too. Every flight." He reached for his tablet. "I'm okay. Just remembering." She nodded as she read. "I don't talk much during flights either. My husband used to say I had my sky face. Quiet, watchful, waiting to land." Noah gave a small, polite smile. She looked at the tray on his table. "That's your design?" she asked, pointing to the screen. He nodded. She leaned a little closer, peering at the 3 symbols. The hand, the ear, the heart. What do they mean? He tapped the heart first, then the ear, then the hand. Everyone deserves to be heard, even without sound. She stared at it for a long moment, then sat back slowly. "My grandson has epilepsy. When he has a seizure in public, people panic, think he's dangerous, think his body's a threat." Noah didn't type anything, but she saw the way his eyes widened just a little, saw the recognition in them, People fear what they don't take time to understand, she said softly. What you've built there, it could change a lot. Noah didn't know what to say. Not because he didn't have words, but because she did, and they were enough. Across the cabin. Elliot moved briskly from row to row, checking on passengers, making sure no one was injured during the turbulence. He paused at 2A when he noticed Noah holding his tablet close to his chest, shoulders rigid. "You good, Noah?" he asked quietly. Noah nodded slowly. Elliot saw the woman beside him and smiled. "Glad you two connected." Noah gave a thumbs up, his eyes clearer now. Elliot reached into his pocket and handed Noah a small card. "We're passing out post-flight feedback forms," he said. "Yours is already pre-tagged for the pilot program, but feel free to add anything you think could help us do better." Noah took the card, folded it, and tucked it in his sleeve. He would fill it out later. For now. The plane steadied. The clouds cleared. And for the first time in years, Noah felt turbulence both outside and inside him start to pass. He looked out the window again. The sky was open now. Endless. Blue. Wide. He wondered how many others had been denied that view. How many had walked away from gates with heads low and hearts full of things they couldn't say. And how many more still would if something didn't change. He tapped his screen and opened a new draft. Title: The Guide for Silent Boarding. Subsection: What flight crews should know. First line: Ask first. Listen differently. Remember, silence isn't absence. It's another kind of presence. He stared at that sentence for a long time, then added, and every presence deserves a place. The morning fog hadn't lifted yet in Helsford. It hung low over the canals and rooftops, blurring the edges of the ICAE headquarters into soft, silver silhouettes. But inside the Ethics Command Center, everything was sharp. Screens glowed with regulatory maps, audit logs updated in real time, tensions pressed down harder than gravity. Samuel Elridge stood at the tall window of his private office, arms behind his back, watching the city refuse to fully wake up. He hadn't slept. The overnight wave of media coverage had hit just before dawn. Somewhere between Gate 14 closing and Vareo Flight 2 lifting off, someone had leaked the ethics audit. Now headlines danced across every aviation channel: Vareo Air suspended after incident. With silent passenger global ethics, body investigates airline over child's rights. Did ICAE overreach industry divided after ticket controversy? And beneath all of them, the image of Noah seated calmly at the gate, tablet in hand, alone but unbowed. It was not a photo Samuel had approved, but he didn't mind it. Let them see his son. Let them see what dignity looked like in silence. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. His private line blinked. The name on the screen made him tense. Director Lucian Merrick, Executive Ethics Council. Samuel answered, "Lucian." The voice on the other end was smooth and clipped, distinctly European. "Samuel, I assume you've read the coverage. I have. And the reactions I expected worse." Lucian made a noise that might have been a laugh or a scoff. "Your override triggered a cascade. 6 partner airlines have already requested emergency protocol reviews. 3 more have suspended operations voluntarily to preempt inspection. Then it's working," Samuel replied. "Or unraveling," Lucian countered. There was a pause. Then, "Let's not pretend this is just about one child. This is about a shift. You're pushing the council toward regulation that was never voted on. You're implementing emotional response as ethical code." Samuel stepped away from the window, voice calm. "No, I'm affirming dignity as a standard. We've spent decades refining safety, comfort, security, but we've never mandated understanding. You're opening the door to thousands of edge cases, exceptions, subjective evaluations. I'm opening the door to people. Lucian, the ones we've overlooked because they don't fit the checklist. Lucian was quiet for a moment. Then his voice softened. Just a notch. This boy, he's your son. Yes. Then you should recuse yourself. Samuel didn't flinch. I won't. Because this isn't about personal gain. It's about systemic blindness. Lucian sighed. You're putting the council under a spotlight it didn't ask for. Samuel returned to his desk and pulled up the latest data report. No. The council put itself there by staying silent too long. Another pause. Then Lucian's voice changed. An emergency vote has been called. Samuel arched an eyebrow. When in 36 hours. To decide what? Whether your motion to mandate the quiet flight protocol across all ICAE member airlines will proceed to full implementation. Samuel sat down slowly. So, it begins? Yes, Lucian said. And you'll need to defend it publicly. With your son's design at the center of a billion-dollar debate. Samuel nodded once. Then let's not waste time. In the sky. 37,000 feet above Europe. Noah sat with his hands resting quietly on the edge of his tray table. His tablet blinked softly. He had finished his draft of the guide. Now he was working on version 2. He called it Version for Crew Training, Day 1 Module. He wasn't sure why, but naming things made them feel real. He was building a world that might not reject him the next time. 1 seat across. The woman in 2B glanced at his screen. She didn't speak, but he could feel her watching with quiet support. And for the first time, Noah didn't mind being seen. He returned to his notes. Do offer clear, visible options for nonverbal communication. Do ask before assuming cognitive delay. Do acknowledge the passenger's autonomy. Don't speak only to accompanying adults if the passenger is of age. Don't touch without permission. Don't use pity language. He stopped, then typed one more. Don't confuse silence with confusion. At that moment, Elliot reappeared. Hey, champ. About 40 minutes till descent. Noah nodded. Want anything before we land? He turned the screen to show a card. No, thank you. Ready. Elliot gave him a soft thumbs up. You did good today. Not just surviving. Leading. Noah didn't react, but inside, something warmed. A part of him that had been locked away maybe since his mother died had cracked open just slightly. He didn't want a medal. He wanted space. And for the first time, the world had started to make a little of it. In Helsford. Samuel stared at the live ticker scrolling on his screen. Airlines were reacting faster than he expected. Some in support, some in fury. But the tide had shifted. The quiet flight protocol was no longer just an idea. It was a disruption, one that couldn't be quietly undone. He opened the terminal and began drafting his address to the ICAE Council. He wouldn't use statistics. He wouldn't open with corporate risk projections or legal loopholes. He would open with a story, a boy, a ticket, a silence, and how the system finally listened. Samuel Elridge closed his email with a decisive click. The emergency vote would convene in exactly 36 hours. He sat in the vast conference chamber of the ICAE, surrounded by empty chairs and polished wood, a silent arena awaiting its champions. He reviewed his opening remarks one more time. He would begin with a memory of Noah's first solo flight, then connect it to today's ethics cascade. He would speak slowly, deliberately, embracing the TTS-friendly pauses. Words are power, but story is transformation. His phone buzzed. A secure message from Dr. Helena Ross flickered on the screen reminder. Council meeting at 0900. Press representation expected at 0930. You have support. She had attached a list of allies. 3 national regulators and 2 airline ethics officers who had quietly signed on to Quiet Flight. He exhaled. He wasn't alone. Across the world, 800 miles above the Atlantic, Noah felt the plane settle into a steady descent. He tapped his tablet's brimmed corner to wake the screen. The guide for crew training had been downloaded by 12 airlines and 5 regional carriers overnight. That was only Phase 1, the silent passenger modules. He drafted a quick note. Thank you for listening. Then he closed his eyes and imagined the council chamber in Helsford. He pictured his father standing at the podium, speaking on behalf of children who could not speak. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing shortly at Kelston International. Please remain seated with your seat belts fastened until the captain turns off the fasten seatbelt sign. Noah leaned back. He thought of Marla Dane and Mason Leary back at Portbridge. He wondered if the 2 of them had heard about the rapid spread of Quiet Flight. He hoped they had, because today's vote would not only decide an airline's fate, it would decide whether silence could be acknowledged anywhere. Below, the runway lights glowed like beacons guiding them home. Noah closed his tablet. He was ready to disembark, but not yet ready to leave his thoughts behind. Meanwhile, Marla Dane sat behind a small desk in a back office at Vireo Air's Portbridge hub. The airport news feed scrolled across the screen. ICAO vote looms on silent boarding protocol. Tech for Access Youth Delegate sparks industry reform. Vireo Air certification threatened by ethics suspension. She scrolled down to the user comments. Finally, someone thought of us. Read one. My son is autistic. I need this. Read another. And then a critical one. This is pandering. Airlines have safety rules for a reason. She pinched her lips. She had spent 18 years adhering to those rules, convinced that compliance alone ensured safety. But now she saw a different kind of risk alienating an entire group of travelers who simply needed space to breathe. She unfolded a feedback card Mason had retrieved from Noah. It was filled with neat handwriting and simple symbols. No language barriers, just icons and truthful statements. She read, I deserve respect. I need to press a button, not shout. Her chest tightened with regret. She had judged him. Yet here he was, teaching the industry that silence could be a language. At ICAE headquarters, the council members were gathering around the oval table. Samuel rose from the back row, straightened his tie, and walked to the front. Reporters lined the back wall, cameras poised. The council administrator tapped her tablet. We begin in 5 minutes, she announced. Samuel nodded. He turned to look at the council president, a weathered man named Gunnar Skovgaard, who had sat through debates on emissions, security, and passenger rights, but never on silent communications. Gunnar gave him a curt nod. It was time. In the press area, journalists readied their recorders. A flick of red lights on camera lenses signaled the start of this unusual public ethics hearing. Samuel stepped to the podium. He spoke his first line. Good morning. I stand before you not as a lawyer or lobbyist, but as a father who watched his son's dignity torn apart at a boarding gate. Pause. Let the weight settle. He told the story of Portbridge Gate 14, of Marla Dane tearing the ticket in half, of Noah typing those 4 words and the world reacting in silence. He described the cascade of airport suspensions, the solidarity of airlines adopting the quiet flight draft, and the hundreds of families who had reached out overnight with shared experiences of being unseen. By the time he concluded, the room was quiet. Not forced quiet, but respectful hush. He slid a photo of Noah at age 8 smiling gently in a hospital bed with headphones on across the display. "Silence is not absence," he said softly. "It is another frequency of presence. We design systems for emergencies, for comfort, for efficiency. Let us also design for empathy." He stepped aside as council members whispered among themselves. The first to rise was Dr. Helena Ross. She praised the emotional clarity of his vision and formally seconded the proposal to integrate quiet flight protocol into Chapter 4 of the ICAE Ethics Code. Next, representatives from Japan and Australia spoke in favor, recounting stories of travelers who could not verbalize their distress. They pointed out that accessibility in aviation was long overdue for an expansion beyond physical accommodations to communication equity. Then came the opposition. A delegate from a major European carrier stood and argued that adding another mandatory protocol would burden crew training and slow operations. He urged caution, suggesting voluntary adoption rather than regulation. Samuel listened, arms folded. He recognized the fear of change, fear of slowing the system that valued timeliness above all. A final speaker rose, a woman from the UN's Disability Rights Division, invited as an observer. She spoke for 10 minutes without notes. She described how silence had been equated with absence in countless public system schools, hospitals, transit. She named it a form of structural erasure. She called on the council to choose transformation over inertia. When she finished, Gunnar Skovgaard tapped his gavel. "The motion is on the floor. All those in favor of integrating quiet flight into the ethics code, please signify." Samuel held his breath as council members raised their hands, one by one. 11 hands up, 2 down, 1 abstained. The vote was clear. Quiet flight would become a mandatory protocol. A low murmur rippled through the press gallery. Reporters clicked recorders. Samuel exhaled for the first time in 36 hours. In the back row, Samuel could just make out the slip of paper on the table. It read, "Family First." He pressed a finger to his heart. Back on the plane. The cabin lights brightened as the seatbelt sign clicked off. Noah opened his eyes. He bent over, tucked his tablet into his sleeve, and stood. He placed headphones on the empty seat beside him and walked forward along the aisle. He found Elliot at the front galley, taking inventory. He tapped him on the shoulder. "Noah," Elliot said with a warm grin. "Everything okay?" Noah tapped his tablet. "ICAO approved quiet flight. Protocol adopted." Elliot's eyes widened. "Really, you're serious?" Noah nodded, folded his arms. Elliot clapped lightly. "You deserve a medal." Noah shook his head. He tapped again. "Just respect." Elliot nodded, understanding the distinction. At Kelston's gate, Marla Dane watched passengers disembark. She saw Mason helping a mother with a nonverbal child navigate the walkway. She saw the elderly woman in 2B exchanging a quiet nod with a flight attendant. And by the door, a banner marking the inaugural Quiet Flight Compliant Flight. A small plaque read, "Gate 2, Quiet Flight Zone." Marla closed her eyes and let the fog roll in. She pictured Noah in his seat, the plane stable, the world finally hearing. She exhaled. It felt like forgiveness. Samuel walked out of the council chamber into the brisk Helsford morning. Reporters jostled to ask questions. He spoke succinctly. "This is a beginning, one that honors all forms of presence. ICE will work with airlines to integrate training within 90 days. We will measure compliance through passenger feedback and system audits. Thank you." He turned and began walking toward his office. Halfway down the corridor, he stopped and whispered to the air, "We did it. Son, Noah stepped off the plane into a gentle drizzle at Kelston International. He blinked, breathed in the damp air, and lifted his head. A small crowd of Vireo staff and accessibility advocates waited. They held placards with quiet flight icons and a banner welcoming him as the silent delegate. He felt a quiet wave of pride. His silence had spoken. And now, the world had learned a new language. Kelston International's arrival hall felt different that morning. The rain had stopped, leaving glass walls streaked with droplets that caught the pale light. Quiet flight banners fluttered gently in the breeze of the ventilation system above. Noah Elridge stood near the exit doors, eyes scanning for his father. He hadn't expected this. A small crowd of airline executives, accessibility advocates, and local press had gathered. A banner read, "Welcome home. Silent delegate." Signs showed the three quiet flight icons, the hand, the ear, the heart. People whispered. Some applauded. It was a new ritual welcoming someone who led by silence. Noah felt his heart pulse in his chest. He wasn't used to applause. He was used to invisibility. But today he accepted it because it meant something larger had changed. He spotted Samuel walking briskly toward him, shoulders straight, pride and relief in his eyes. He stepped aside so the two could embrace without blocking the aisle. Samuel wrapped his arm around Noah's shoulders. Noah leaned in lightly, just enough to feel the steady warmth of his father's presence. They stood together as the local airport director, Denise Holloway, approached with a small podium. Denise was known for her no-nonsense approach, but today her voice trembled with emotion. She tapped the microphone. "Good morning, everyone. It is my honor to officially welcome back Mr. Elridge and to celebrate the first quiet flight compliant arrival in our region. This is the start of a new chapter in passenger equity." The crowd applauded. Noah watched as Marla Dane stepped forward. She was no longer in uniform. She wore a simple blouse and slacks, carrying a quiet flight feedback card she filled out herself. "Marla Dane, Gate Agent, Vireo Air. I stand corrected. I will train to listen first." Noah gave her a small nod of acknowledgement. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. She read his gesture and smiled a genuine, humble smile that erased years of rigid certainty. Denise continued, "Kelston Airport will serve as a pilot site for countrywide quiet flight integration. Within 3 months, all major YOG carriers must submit their implementation plans, as must every airport under our jurisdiction. Today we set a new standard not just for safety or comfort, but for dignity." The crowd broke into applause again. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes. Yet through it all, Noah felt calm. This was not fireworks. This was a quiet shift. Later, outside the terminal, Noah and Samuel made their way to a waiting car. As they walked, a young woman approached holding a small tablet. "Mr. Elridge," she asked softly. "I'm Lila Young, a doctoral student researching nonverbal communication and travel. May I ask a few questions?" Noah tapped his tablet. "Yes, please." Lila smiled and tapped her own screen. "Thank you." She asked concise, respectful questions, which Noah answered by typing short, honest phrases. It's about respect. We all have different voices. Systems must adapt. Samuel watched them, impressed by Lila's careful tone. He later learned she planned to incorporate quiet flight metrics into her thesis on accessible design. Research like hers would ensure the protocol evolved responsibly. At Vireo Air headquarters, chaos and celebration mixed. Don Talbot, the regional operations manager, strode through the halls. He'd spent the past week fielding crisis calls. Now he was tasked with drafting Vireo's compliance plan. He glanced at the screen on his desk. Submit Quiet Flight Integration Plan 60 days. He shook his head, then smiled. This time the deadline felt like an opportunity. He picked up the phone. Marla, let's talk training modules. Marla answered promptly. I've already drafted the first session. Gate agents will do role play with the icons. Don laughed. That's perfect. Let's pilot it next week. Across town. Dr. Helena Ross convened her team at ICAE's Helsford office. A secure video link connected regulators from Europe, Asia, North America, and Africa. All were there to hammer out the details of the quiet flight rollout. Helena opened the session. We have unanimous council approval. Now we build the working group. Standards for icon design, pilot training, passenger feedback loops, data privacy protocols. One delegate from Japan's Civil Aviation Bureau asked about cultural adaptations. Another, from Brazil's Airport Authority, asked about low-tech accommodations for regional carriers. Each voiced concerns wisely. Each sought solutions collaboratively. Helena listened, made notes, then turned to the screen with Samuel beside her. She nodded at him. This is the architecture of respect, Samuel added, and we will iterate. Quiet flight is not static. It is living. In Kelston's Arrivals Lounge, Noah waited by a low table covered with quiet flight merchandising prototypes, lapel pins, window stickers, digital app widgets. Nothing flashy, just clear, simple icons. A local airline technician named Arjun Patel displayed them proudly. Kids are already asking for these pins, Arjun explained. They want to show they travel quietly. A small boy in a wheelchair rolled up, wearing a red quiet flight bracelet. He showed it to Noah shyly. Noah smiled and tapped his own wrist. The boy's smile lit up his whole face. Samuel knelt beside them and asked Arjun, "How soon can we ship these to other airports?" Arjun tapped his tablet. "We'll start with our regional network, then scale globally. We'll meet the 90-day mandate." Samuel nodded. Then he lifted his gaze to the departure screens. He saw Vareo Flight 302 listed under Quiet Flight Phase 2 trials. Destinations across Europe, Asia. The world was awakening to Noah's design. The final ceremony of the day took place in Kelston's Conference Center. Representatives from 6 airlines, 4 airport authorities, and 2 passenger rights NGOs sat around a large table. On the wall behind them was projected the Quiet Flight logo and the motto, "Silence is another voice." Samuel and Noah entered together. The room stood and applauded. Noah took his seat at the head of the table. It was his place now. He opened his tablet. A presentation lit up the screen slides of frontline scenarios, best practice guidelines, passenger testimonials. A moment later, Marla Dane joined him at the table, representing gate operations. Denise Holloway represented airports. Dr. Ross represented ICAE. Tonal questions began logistics, data collection, funding, legal frameworks. Noah watched his father answer yeast choices, but he noticed the hand-raised passenger advocates in the back, ready to speak. Some were parents of nonverbal travelers. Others were accessibility experts. He tapped his tablet and invited the first advocate, a woman named Priya Menon, to share her story. Priya adjusted her microphone. "My daughter is nonverbal and non-mobile. Traveling was always a nightmare. I worried each time we flew. Quiet flight changes that. It means she can request help without fear." The room fell silent. Samuel leaned forward. Priya's story is why quiet flight matters, not just as policy, but as lived experience. Questions resumed technical, procedural, financial, but every argument now referenced the human need. The icons were simple, but their impact was profound. By evening, The working group had a provisional roadmap software updates for boarding systems, new training modules in 3 languages, passenger awareness campaigns, compliance audits tied to ethics ratings. ICAE pledged to revisit progress quarterly. Noah watched the discussions, absorbing every detail. He thought of the icons he first drew in a quiet conference room in Denver, of the audacity it took to turn silence into a protocol. As the meeting ended, Samuel turned to him and said quietly, "You've done more than design icons. You've designed change." Noah tapped his tablet. "We all did it together." Samuel smiled. "And we will keep doing it together." Outside, Kelston's lights shimmered on rain-glazed tarmac. The day had begun with uncertainty and ended in collaborative resolve. Noah felt a deep calm settle in his chest. His journey had started with a torn ticket. Now it unfolded into a tapestry of shared humanity. They stepped into the cool night air. Quiet flight banners lined the route to the parking area, blue icons glowing softly in lamplight. Noah touched the window sticker on the conference center door one last time and smiled. His silence had spoken, and now the world was listening. Kelston's harbor lights shimmered off the water as dawn broke over the city. A thin mist curled above the quay, the air fresh with promise. Inside a modest conference room at the Global Ethics Innovation Summit, the final chapter of Quiet Flight was unfolding. A long mahogany table filled the center, surrounded by representatives of airlines, airports, regulators, educators, healthcare providers, and even public transit authorities. Each place card bore a logo: Delta, Emirates, Air Japan, Lufthansa, Eurorail, Metro Transit. Yet the last card simply read, Passenger Ethics Council Chair, N. Elridge. Noah Elridge walked in beside his father, Samuel, and took that seat. He wore a plain gray sweater, no uniform, no cosplay of authority, just himself. He carried his tablet, still glowing softly with the Quiet Flight interface. Samuel leaned down and whispered, "Remember, voice's presence. Yours speaks volumes." Noah nodded, tapped his screen once, and the room's projector lit up with a single slide. The Quiet Standard, a framework for universal dignity. Chapters numbered 1 through 5 appeared. 1. Universal Passenger Dignity Protocols. 2. Mandatory crew training on bias and nonverbal engagement. 3. Ethics Data Integration Standards. 4. Quarterly Compliance Audits. 5. Continuous User-Driven Iteration. He tapped again, and Chapter 1 expanded on screen. Every passenger, regardless of communication style, must have visible, accessible, nonverbal options to request assistance, information, and comfort. He paused, letting the words settle, then tapped to reveal an icon grid: the hand, the ear, the heart now refined with rounded edges and high-contrast colors. Each icon carried a brief description in 6 major languages and Braille. A representative from Eurorail leaned forward. "These icons are elegant, but how do we ensure consistency across platforms, trains, buses, ferries?" Noah tapped to slide to Chapter 3, Ethics Data Integration Standards. A flowchart appeared showing encrypted consent protocols, anonymized usage data, and traceable audit trails, shared open APIs and unified guidelines. He explained silently via text displayed on screen. He tapped an arrow icon, and a simplified code snippet appeared basic enough for any system to integrate. He tapped again, closing that slide. A reporter from an international news agency scribbled notes. Next. Chapter 2. Mandatory Crew. Training on bias and nonverbal engagement. Photos showed real cabin crew, gate agents, ticket counters, and platform conductors practicing scenario drills with simulated icons projected above passengers. Training modules must be completed before any crew member boards a shift. Noah's text read, "Assessment through role play and digital simulations ensures understanding beyond rote memorization." A delegate from Air Japan spoke up, "Our culture values deference, but we sometimes avoid direct engagement." How do we reconcile quiet flight with our customs? Noah tapped to reveal a cultural adaptation guide, each region's version of the icons. Color palettes adjusted, etiquette notes advising how to acknowledge nonverbal requests respectfully within cultural norms. He tapped to advance. Chapter 4. Quarterly Compliance Audits. A calendar grid showed audit periods, data review checkpoints, and continuous improvement loops based on passenger feedback. Noah tapped a line of text failure to meet compliance in 3 consecutive quarters results in provisional ethics status and operational holds. Heads nodded. The language was firm but clear. Finally, Chapter 5. Continuous user-driven iteration. A network diagram showed passenger advocacy groups, developers, regulators, and airline ethics committees connected in a loop. Noah's own feedback card appeared in the corner, emphasizing that quiet flight would evolve as new communication needs emerged. He tapped one last time. The words appeared in bold on screen. Silence is not absence. It is presence on another frequency. The room remained still. Then a senior executive from Emirates Airlines stood. His tone was measured. "We endorse the quiet standard. We will begin integration on our fleet by Q1 next year." Others followed. Lufthansa, Delta, Qantas. A cascade of pledges filled the room. Each delegate signed a digital accord on a shared tablet at the front of the table. Samuel watched his son lead with minimal words. He felt pride and a deep calm. This was beyond tickets and gate denials. This was a new protocol for humanity. After the final signature, a light whoosh sound filled the room. Quiet flight's subtle confirmation tone. The quiet standard was official. Reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed. But Noah remained seated. He let the noise wash over him without flinching. Then he tapped his tablet's home icon. The interface transformed into a simple thank you card addressed to every passenger who had ever been ignored. He tapped send. Outside the hall, Kelston International's departure board displayed a new legend beneath each major airline. Quiet flight certified. Travelers glanced up, curious. A family stood below, with a nonverbal child who tapped at an icon on the father's phone. The mother smiled, tears in her eyes. "They finally see you," she whispered. On the tarmac, maintenance crews affixed quiet flight decals beside jet bridge doors. Gate agents practiced icon recognition drills. Flight attendants adjusted tablets. Every part of the system began to hum in quiet readiness. In Helsford, Samuel returned to his office. He closed the window on the Ethics Command Center and opened an email draft addressed to ICAE's global mailing list. Subject: the quiet standard. Thank you for listening. He wrote today, "We honor dignity in its many forms. Thank you to every voice spoken, typed, signed, or silent who guided us here. Let us commit to maintaining the quiet standard, evolving it with empathy and rigor. Silence has never been empty. It has always had something to say. Sincerely, Samuel Elridge, Chair, Passenger Ethics Council." He hit send, back at home in Seattle. Noah and Samuel sat together in the living room. Rain tapped against the window. Noah was sketching his next idea, a wearable bracelet that pulses based on environmental stress, an extension of quiet flight for daily life. Samuel watched. He remembered the torn ticket, the hush of the council room, the moment the room stood for his son. He rubbed Noah's shoulder gently. "What are you building next?" Noah tapped his tablet. A world where everyone travels quietly and everyone listens. Samuel smiled. We already started. They sat in companionable silence, proud of what had been done and hungry for what remained. Outside, Seattle's lights glimmered, reflecting a city learning to listen anew. And in that quiet, their story born from a torn ticket, powered by silent resilience, found its place in the world's new language. Noah's journey reminds us that silence is not absence, but presence on another frequency. We witnessed how a single act of discrimination hurt more than one boy. It echoed through every aisle, every cockpit, and every boardroom. Yet from that tearing sound blossomed compassion, accountability, and a new global standard that honors every traveler's voice, however quiet. Let's carry this message forward. Respect isn't optional, and inclusion demands action. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe so you never miss our next chapter of hope, courage, and change. Together, we'll continue to shine a light on the unspoken stories that transform our world.